Welcome to the Rebecca Panepinto Project. Today, I am very excited to host Manuel Martinez. He's a technical account manager at AWS and also the host of the Career Downloads podcast. With a background as an infrastructure engineer, he has built his career and his personal brand around a simple but powerful mission: solving business problems with technology. Manny is a frequent speaker at industry events and consistently challenges the conventional tech industry mindset by advocating for understanding problems before proposing solutions. He is also all about building authentic relationships over transactional networking. When he's not helping IT professionals to level up their careers or interviewing guests about their tech career paths, you can find Manny volunteering with several different local organizations where he has developed a true passion for helping others and proving that technology skills can solve community problems too. I really loved our conversation today because I've gotten to know Manny really well over the past couple months and love the platform that he has and the impact he's making through his podcast. So I'm excited for you to learn more today too. Enjoy the show. Manny, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to get to talk to you again.
Yes, I'm glad to swap roles here a little bit. I was on your podcast just about a month or so ago, which was really fun because it was the first time I got to record face-to-face. You have a really cool in-person studio there in Vegas. So that was a fun change of scenery for doing a podcast. But now we're on my soil, for lack of a better term, to chat about what you've been doing through your incredible podcast. But, the topic of your podcast is what really first intrigued me even to reach out to you and get to know you, called Career Downloads, where you have super interesting, a lot of technology-oriented people come on and talk about their career journey. So before we go dive in too much more on the podcast front, I want to talk a little about your career journey. So give us the high level of kind of where you've been and what's led you to now the incredible role and the way that you're serving AWS as a TAM.
Well, I've, like a lot of my guests, and as you've probably encountered in your career, like I've done a whole gambit of things, right? So I started as working the help desk for a casino. So I'm based here out of Las Vegas. So I started the casino industry, help desk, PC technician. And just one of the things that I really love about the tech, career field is it's always changing. Like a lot of people don't like change. Like I loved it. I always wanted to learn something new, try something different. So I've dabbled. Again, I started in casinos. I moved to the public sector. I've worked on the vendor side. I worked for a value-added reseller. The airline industry, you name it, I've probably touched it or come close to that industry. And originally, so, my parents, so I'm the first generation born here in the U.S. My parents were from Mexico. They were hardworking, worked in the construction industry, had their own business. So I would say the first half of my career is just, I didn't know much about the corporate life. So it was just like, work hard, your work will speak for itself. And you just kind of go through that whole like work. Wasn't until later on that I kind of, and this is where I would say my career kind of really took off, is learning to be a little bit more of an advocate for the work that I was doing, instead of just like, oh, hey, I did this work and eventually somebody will notice. It's no, hey, here's these things that we did. And eventually that visibility, got me attention from people within my network. And, somebody put it in my head that like, hey, have you ever thought about working for VMware? And I was a big VMware infrastructure person. So that, I was like, wow, that's not a bad idea. Like I never thought about it. So then at that point forward, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And, it took me about 4 different tries. Eventually I got in and again, continue to grow. So now I was on the sales side, as a solutions engineer, again, learning more things about communication and how do you really understand and partner with, a business to solve their problems. It's not just about technology. It's like, hey, what's their pain point? What's their problem? And I think that really kind of helped me grow outside of the technical aspect. And now, the human part of the role. And eventually that kind of led me towards Amazon, like all these great things that I had been doing, putting on my LinkedIn resume. Eventually I got the attention of, somebody at AWS, and it was interesting because I had no cloud experience, right? I was an infrastructure engineer. And what they said is, okay, but you have tech background. We can teach you AWS, but it's the communication, the things that I had learned at VMware and kind of talking about solving problems. So that was, quick summary of, how my career started and eventually how I landed to where I'm at now.
I'm sure they saw the future of VMware on AWS too. And they're like, oh, here's a guy.
Right. Yeah.
And help make that happen.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, it did come in handy too, because there was, one of my customers that I helped support when I first came on. That was one of their big services. So it was kind of nice having that background.
Very cool. And then how was the Loop experience? I'm curious.
I did a little bit of research, and similar, like, anytime you work some of these bigger organizations, it's not just like, oh, you're going to meet an interview with one person or, just a one panel. But this one was, it was like an all day thing. And at least it felt like all day.
In person, probably at the time too, right?
So no, I got hired right. So I'm going to hit 4 years the end of this month. So 2022, is that right?
Okay.
Math's correct.
Maybe you snuck in there before.
Yeah, no, it was right after. So it was all online. So again, COVID. So I was that typical person that, when they talked about like, now we're remote, do we really have to get fully dressed? So I was, business up top, party on the bottom, right? So I was in shorts and, sandals, but, dressed, and it was exhausting because I thought, okay, well, they might break it up. So when I interviewed at VMware, I had 1 or 2 interviews, they would kind of break it up, and then you had time to kind of prepare for the next one. And here you probably had maybe 10 minutes at most. And just because I had a lot of questions, so my free time, I ended up chewing up with questions, but it was a lot. I mean, when people say that you go through and it's just question after question, that's really what it was.
Yeah, very cool. I think it's a great learning experience. I did it during COVID times too, and was told I looped really well, but it was a great resignation, and I just had a lot of offers, so I went a different direction. But it was a cool learning experience. It was interesting to like not even know who you're about to talk on Zoom with. It was like definitely different.
Yeah, and a cool story from that,
and learn as you go.
Yeah, one of the cool stories is so one of the people on my loop, he ended up being my second manager. Because I saw him and I was like, man, this guy looks familiar. And he was kind of the same way. And he actually looked it up and he was like, I was on your interview loop. And I was like, well, you have no one to blame but yourself for me being here.
Nice. That's funny. Yeah, Amazon's a big world. So to cross paths again later like that is sometimes rare.
Yeah, definitely.
So now take us back to the ideation and then the actually bringing to life of your show, Career Downloads. Take your timeline to that creation, and inspiration was similar to mine, and a lot of it came out of COVID days. So curious when that kind of came to light, when you started really rolling with the show.
It did. So it came to light about, I would say, a little over 2 years ago. So probably for the past 7 years, I had been teaching part-time at one of the colleges, again, teaching VMware courses, teaching AWS courses. I got involved in a lot of mentorship programs. So you get students and people trying to get into the field. You get a lot of the same questions, and I'm sure it's probably happened to you. Hey, how did you get to where you're at? What should I be doing? And I gave people my experiences. Well, talking with a friend of mine, I would share information to kind of help his mentee. I would ask him, and we were just sharing that information. And the more I talk to people, again, like if I talk about the first half of my career, again, it was just heads down. And, as you talk to other people and say, hey, well, what did you do? How did this work for you? So that ideation was like, man, this is information that would be great if it was out there just in general for people to consume, right? And I was like, well, there has to be something on YouTube or, blogs. And I wasn't able to find anything. So a friend of mine was like, well, why don't you just start a podcast and interview people and get their experiences and share it with other people? I was like, sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. And he was like, no, you do it. So eventually that's kind of what got me started. And again, I'm one for trying new things. And I was like, well, I'll figure it out as I go. And, I've been iterating on it over time. And one of the fantastic things is I get to meet a lot of new people. So it first started with, people I knew, but now I got to meet you through this and, start to establish not just a relationship, but a friendship. And that's probably one of been the most rewarding things for me. But then also hearing other people and saying like, oh man, like that sounds like a great story. That was inspiring for me. Or, I've known Rebecca for, forever. And I didn't know that she was a drummer or, all these different things. So it's really nice to kind of show people that, okay, hey, there's all this technology, but at the end of the day, there's people behind it.
And their own unique career journeys, which are typically not linear.
No, they're not. And, that was the thing that a lot of people go and like, oh, well, what should I be doing? And you and I could be doing the exact same job in the same role, same company, and got there completely different ways. So it was just kind of trying to also dispel that myth of like, there's no linear path. It's not like you're going to be a doctor, right? And you're like, okay, you have to do these steps and, eventually become a doctor. In tech, I mean, people that go and have had a PC since they were 8, right? And went all through college and they knew that this is what they were going to do. And I've had other people that are like, I fell into this career. Like I had no idea, no aspirations that this was something I was going to do.
So take us back to episode 1. And I'm sure there were nerves or to that. I'm sure you didn't have the gear you have today. What did it look like to stumble through try number 1? Now, especially as you look back at it with tons more experience under your belt.
So I had 2 number 1s. The first number 1, one of my neighbors is an audio engineer and they happen to be starting a podcast studio. So the first number 1, there wasn't much to it. I showed up and the nerves and all that was just really trying to understand like, how am I going to get this information out of, my guest? And I apologize to Cindy all the time, every time I see her, because I was still figuring this out. So I was trying to go very linear, like job to job and try to get every insight from there. Instead of just making it more like a conversation and saying, okay, hey, we're going to figure this out. And, I'm just going to take bits and pieces of what you say and, try to really uncover, some great insights out of that. Well, I did that probably for about 5 or 6 episodes and I had just started. It wasn't making money. So there was no way for me to say I can continue this moving forward to keep paying for a studio. So I was like, you know what? It's not that hard. I've seen what they're doing. I'll do it on my own. So then I started again, but this time doing it on my own. And that was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. Right. And I'm sure you've seen and it's not just the editing, but it's setting up the cameras, making sure you have the mics. And I had a couple fails where I would record and no audio, or I had one where it's pretty interesting. I had one that it's funny because he was talking a lot about AI and, robotics. Probably 15 minutes into his episode, I lost video. I had all the audio and no video. And I kind of asked him to come back on and he was like, hey, why don't we get some AI? And what we did is we just took the audio, took some pictures and generated like a cartoon characters of us having the rest of the conversation. So it was pretty interesting. So again, a lot of learning, a lot of fun, but it's a lot more work. Even just, I have a different appreciation for, content creators, people that do podcasts that don't have a full production team. Just the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes. It's a lot more than people realize.
I had a good idea on the audio front just from the years of being a musician and knowing what, the guy in the sound booth was always going through. But you add the video component. Yeah. And then you add the nuance of a guest. And like, I don't always have a guest that has a setup like yours. And you've got to, make sure you leave some room for error on that front with how their audio sounds and things like that. So it definitely keeps you on your toes. As long as you stay agile and ready every day to react to something that could go wrong and pivot quickly, then you definitely can keep up with it.
That, and then the other thing is one of the lessons that I learned is applying a lot of what I do within technology, right? So, things that I tell businesses like, hey, do you have a backup? Do you have, some sort of failover and resiliency? I didn't have any of that. I had the ability to do it, but I just didn't leverage it. So the audio cut out to where the hard drive that I was recording, but I could have had SD cards in the cameras as a backup recording there as well. So it's one of the things that, after that happened, I was like, oh, got it. Let me treat this more like a business project instead of a hobby. And that's when I started going through. I'm like, okay, I need a checklist. I need to make sure I have backups. Hey, what do I need? I need SD cards. Okay. What happens if this fails? What happens if that fails? What happens if I lose power? How do I verify all these things? So again, it was just kind of going back to, oh, treat this like a business and not like a hobby. And that really changed how I approached it.
Now, I have a favorite episode of when you interviewed Rishma, the former CIO at Vegas Airport. She is very cool, and I'm excited to potentially have her on the show this year in her new role. That one stood out to me as just a really cool career journey, and then she's such a powerhouse for women in tech. That it was just a great episode. But there's a few other I think you hailed as some of your favorites. Curious, what's one or two that kind of sticks out to you as really being impactful and something that you were able to learn from inadvertently through just having this conversation.
So definitely, I would agree with you. So Rishma's was very powerful just because of like she is very energetic. And like you said, she's a powerhouse, but then understanding that there's a method to what she does. And she is very, even if it may not seem like it up front, she's very thoughtful in making sure that she's doing something good to impact her community and bring not just people within her organization, but just like the community around her up. I recently had one with Chelsea and, Chelsea Bonilla, and she talks about just her path of getting to Gartner as a non-traditional, like a tech practitioner, because she's kind of similar to you. So she's in the sales role and she helps support public sector and just the way that she got there. So that one really stood out to me. I had another one with, so a coworker of mine, James McDuffie. So again, just he had a little bit more of a traditional path, but just kind of having worked with him for, at the time, probably almost 3 years, and just understanding a little bit more about his background. And it kind of goes back to, as much as we think we know people, we don't. So just his really impacted me with like, oh, I understand now why he approaches things at work the way he does. He is very good at being vocal about the things that he's working on and the impact, and making sure, and me and him have talked about, is like, hey, how do we be efficient with our time and our resources, but then also make sure that the work that we're doing is visible, right? Like, it's just not, hey, don't keep your head down, but make sure like, hey, here's what we're working on. And then you quickly get feedback when people don't care. You're like, I'm working on the wrong thing. So then, but the only way you'll know is, again, talking out loud. And I would say if I had to pick one more, it would be Estella Baca. And hers would be just her career path. She came, and like a lot of my other guests, like came from a different country, came here, and just, it really goes to show that exposure is a big part in kind of what we think is possible, right? And even, she said that one of her biggest influences was her grandmother, and just, she used to live on a ranch and they would watch the Mexican soap operas, and her grandmother used to tell her like, hey, pay attention to how these executive women on the TV show, like, look at how they dress, look at how they present themselves. And she was like, well, what do I care? Like, I'm going to be a farm girl. Like, that doesn't matter. And she's like, no, you never know. Lo and behold, when she got into tech and just interviewing that whole process, it's like, hey, how you carry yourself, kind of understanding the different paths that people go through. So I think those would probably be, some of my more memorable and impactful episodes.
Was there a moment in maybe any of those examples where you even had your own aha or super personal connection moment to their story that helped you realize, maybe an area of your career that you became more thankful for, or a way that you were inspired to progress in your own career?
So I would say the one with Estella Baca, because she talks about her reading a book that changed her life and her career. And it was a book by Lauren Hassan called The Develop Her Book. So it's a play on the word developer, but it's develop her. And Lauren just talks about her. Like, I actually picked up the book, even though it's not really written for me, but anybody could really use it. But when Estella talks about it, and she goes, it talks about doing things that really scare us and make us uncomfortable and grow, that's where growth comes from. So, for example, keeping track of, like, she wanted to be in more visible projects. So then you have to kind of speak up. She would want to attend a conference, and okay, well, maybe she can't attend as an attendee, but she would reach out to them. Can I volunteer? What can I do just to get there and kind of be exposed to these different people? And I think that really resonated with me, and kind of like I had an aha moment, because I thought I was doing that a little bit in my own kind of world. But like, as you start to read and, you look at Lauren's career and even Estella's, like what they did after kind of they had that moment and their trajectory. And I would say probably like starting the podcast, and I would say this is probably about a year and a half ago. And that really changed how I approach what I do. We talked about like our personal brands, right? So that's when I was really like, hey, I have a story to tell. Just like Lauren shared her story, I need to share mine, not because I want people to know like, hey, look at Manny, but it's, you never know who you might impact. So that was the thing that really hit for me, is just like these two women who are sharing their stories, the impact that, hearing somebody else's story had on them. I was like, oh, well, I should be doing the same thing, and kind of, not just highlighting my guests, but like, hey, here's what I do as well.
Well, the cool thing you said that's come out of doing the show are the like surprise opportunities yourself anyway. It's the, getting to host a awards show and getting to be, a public speaker in certain situations. Are some of those that have caught you off guard that you were like, wow, I never thought this being a byproduct of just showing up every day, recording career downloads?
I think you nailed it. I mean, both of those, but I think the bigger one was being asked to kind of interview the award winners for the Top Tech Awards. So that came about, again, just through people that were nominated, and, again, being visible on LinkedIn. They saw what I was doing, kind of had the podcast. So that, the organizer reached out to me, and she asked, and she goes, have you ever done a remote one? Is that something that you're capable of? And I was like, well, I have done like 3 episodes, remotely out of a hotel room with coworkers, as we had a networking event. And so I was like, yeah, I think I do it. And that's one of the things that I always feel, even if I don't know how to do it, I will say that I can and figure it out. Now, it may not be the best quality, or, it may not be, top tier, but I will try and do my best. And that one, I think, was really that moment. So not only the opportunity, but I was like, man, I'm not going to be able to do this myself, just coordinating with other guests, having to, lab up the guests, and reached out to 2 people in my contact and, in my network. And I was like, hey, I know that you're familiar with recording and you do a little bit of marketing and video, like, can you assist me? And just the fact that I almost didn't even get to finish asking the question. They're like, yes, I'll help you. Right. And so that was kind of that big moment for me, is like, not only did I didn't think this opportunity would happen, but just the people that came and said, yep, we'll support you, whatever you need. And it turned out fantastic.
So when it comes to the guest selection too, and like, you and I have to prospect the next people to interview as hosts of our own show versus just, some people just sit on the mic for an hour and talk. I don't have the skill set. I talk to people. So when you're looking for guests and collaboration opportunities, what stands out as somebody who's like right in your wheelhouse that really serves your show well and serves your audience well?
So I try to do most of my, when I first started off, is just looking at LinkedIn, looking at people that, again, maybe what they're posting, looking at kind of their job history, like what looks interesting. Have they had a role that just, I haven't talked to somebody in that role, but really, again, also reaching out to my network and just, again, people come up because you have some sort of connection with them. Like I might get somebody that pops up and says, hey, this might be a good person for your network. And I look at, well, why? Who are they connected to? Okay. Oh, they're connected to Rebecca. Let me ask Rebecca, hey, do you know this person? What do you know about them? And that's kind of how I do my prospecting. But then eventually I get them on, just a 30-minute sync call and explain to them what I'm trying to do, and then just really get to talk to them as a person. Say, hey, I just want to know more about you. I don't want to go too deep into their career, but just like, hey, what has worked for you? What has not? What are some of your struggles? And just the stories that people tell me in that, 30-minute conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh, this person would be amazing. Whereas other people have had probably good careers, but maybe they don't have that good story, or they just don't know how to articulate it. And, they're very nervous. So then, there is that little bit of like, well, I can kind of force you to go through it, but if it's just not in you to kind of want to share your story, or, if I ask you a question and we're not being recorded and you have a hard time just kind of telling me, then it makes it hard to bring that person on as a guest, right? Because like you said, because then I feel like I'm doing all the talking when it's really, I want them to tell the story.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Definitely been in your shoes on that front too. And I enjoy though, because a lot of cases when I have a CIO on, for example, they don't have public speaking experience and this might be their first podcast. And so I love that I get to kind of coach and teach them along. And then they ultimately have always produced a good product for me. But it's been fun to like see them a little nervous and see how they approach the outline. And it's endearing as long as they're coachable. Then I know I can get a quality product out of the conversation. So that's kind of a fun way to get to know people and really build an interesting relationship as well.
And I'm sure you've seen that quite a bit is, a lot of times we have this idea that people in a VP or C-suite, that they're comfortable doing these types of recordings or things like that. But that's not always the case. They are comfortable for the most part in their role because that's not what they know how to do. But again, like you bring them into like a recorded podcast and you're asking them questions and they're a little bit more hesitant than you would think that they would be.
These are things you learn along the journey.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward now, 4, 5, maybe 6 years. What's your vision for the maturity and growth of the podcast? And then maybe even an element of how that impacts your career as well.
I would say something that's happened recently is I kind of brought on 2 interns, because one of the things that I noticed was, I was doing a lot. And I always felt like I was kind of playing catch up or just really maintaining right where I was at. I thought about, and I talked to you a little bit about this, is I thought about stopping. And I actually did stop for about 2 months. And I was like, well, I'm putting in all this work. I don't know how many people are really finding value in this, right? Like you get a couple of the same people that are like, hey, I enjoy this. But when I stopped and I had people reaching out, making sure, hey, is everything okay? We haven't seen any episodes come out. And I was like, yeah, I'm just taking a break. I'm not sure. And I actually had probably 3 or 4 people tell me like, don't stop, right? Like what you're doing does have value. Like I find value. And it was people at all levels of their career, right? People just starting out. They were like, no, this is helpful for me as I'm starting out. I had other people that were farther along in the career. They're like, I just really enjoy hearing other people's career paths. And I've connected with them and, just ask them questions based on something they said on your show. So kind of bringing on the interns has kind of freed me up. So they're doing a little bit more of the editing. Eventually I want them to do some of the social media. But I think that's freeing me up to really start thinking strategically, right? So kind of going back to thinking about the business. If I'm heads down all the time, like I can't grow it. So now it's really understanding, okay, well, what kind of partnerships do I want to do? How do I want to grow this? And, at the beginning of this year, I set an ambitious goal. So I was almost at 100 subscribers on YouTube. And I was like, well, I'm going to get 500 by the end of the year. Okay, well, I can't just say it, right? I have to come up with a plan. So it's really understanding, okay, well, the first part was bring on interns. So now I can start looking at partnerships and, maybe vetting more established guests, like people that could bring more visibility to kind of what I'm doing. So I think 5 years from now, I would like to say that this is not only just a podcast, but hopefully a community, right? Mentorship and teaching. It would be great if at some point I could bring a lot of the guests back and say, hey, we're going to have like maybe a round table or something where I can have just people come in and ask the guests. Like maybe I have 3 or 4 CIOs, maybe somebody like yourself, like people who have been in the sales role, so that people can ask questions and say, okay, well, you mentioned this, or hey, in this role you did this, and just kind of grow community and kind of establish some sort of mentorship program out of this. So there's a number of ideas that have just kind of, it's early, right? We're only in February, but I'm starting to kind of jot these ideas as they come to mind and say, okay, let me write that down. And if it comes up again, or if I think of something else again, just really be more intentional with what I'm doing as opposed to just treating it like a hobby that I do on the side.
Yeah. Even on like a 5-year timeline, it could be cool, like to do a where are they now? Someone off doing something new, they changed careers or they've significantly progressed in their career. I had a situation where a CIO buddy of mine became the COO and wrote a book. And so I was like, yeah, you got to come back. I don't care that you work for the same company still. Like your role has completely changed and now you've got this cool content to share with the world. So that's a repeat guest right there.
The show is one part of it, but then also trying to grow a community around it. So I thought, kind of brainstorm with a couple other people is, having people from, 2025 or 2026, like get all those guests together so that they can even meet each other, right? So it's not even just about me, but it's like, hey, how else can I impact other people? Maybe not just listeners, but just guests, and say, okay, hey, Rebecca, like I'm going to have a get together, or I'm going to have some community or a chat or something where just guests from the last 6 months, right? Or from the last 3 months, whatever that is, so that you all can network together as well.
Well, Manny, it's been so fun to have you on the show today to learn more about the amazing impact you're having through your show that I've been a fan of already since I met you. And there's the incredible inspiration you are to folks as they go through their career journey. But I want to wrap things up with just one final question for you on the personal front, and it relates to principles. I'm curious, what is the guiding principle that you've lived by to be successful in business?
So looking back on my career, and something I've kind of established recently, and I think it's a good marker for me also moving forward, is I've developed a framework around 3 S's. It's sacrifice, success, and significance. And really the idea is all 3 of those are tied together. So if we talk about my career, if we talk about the podcast, just anything around there, again, sacrifice is what's it going to take for me to, if I make this decision, for example, growing the podcast and making this bigger. Okay, well, what does that mean in terms of sacrifice? Well, I'm going to have to sacrifice, going and playing sports on the weekends, or, maybe hanging out with my kids, so there is an element of sacrifice for me personally. Then there's success. Okay, well, what does that mean for me personally? Well, that means that I'm going to get more visibility. I could potentially get sponsorships. Again, that's success. And again, that's attributed more personally. And again, that just comes down to me. And then the last one is significance. And I think this is really, of the 3, when I evaluate a decision, this has to be the biggest one. And significance meaning, okay, if I grow this podcast and I sacrifice this time with people, activities, and yes, it brings me success, but really the significance, meaning the impact that I have on other people, should be bigger. Meaning I'm able to reach more people. I've grown this to the point where I can hire a full production team. Right now I'm creating jobs. We're automating things, really building a business out of this. So I think that's the guiding principle, because it's something, especially in the last few years of my career, right? It's talking about being visible and how I've moved up. Like, okay, it's great to make more money, but again, that's just success. And if that's higher than the sacrifice or the significance, I start to feel kind of out of balance. Like, okay, well, I'm making more money, but why? What's significance? Oh, well, now I can afford to send my kids to college, or, I can have more family time and do family trips. So maybe that kind of evens out. Or maybe the significance is, I'm a part of an organization that is, making big changes. So again, that's kind of the guiding principle is I look at those three and really try to weigh them against each other. And I want to make sure that significance is bigger than the sacrifice and the success that I will achieve as part of it.
Very cool. And from my perspective, I would say you're on the right track, and I'm excited to keep tabs on all you continue to do through Career Downloads. I'll make sure to link the show in the show notes so everybody else can also keep tabs on Manny, and keep doing what you're doing. Keep making an incredible impact in the world and inspiring people through their career journey.
Yeah. And thank you again for kind of sharing your career. And again, meeting people like you has been probably, I mentioned it before, is it's really been what continues to drive me. It's just knowing that there's people like you that, have all these awesome career stories, but then again, just building a friendship that even outside of this platform, you're like, hey, you're doing great things, and provide bad feedback. Like I've had people that will go through, and it's just knowing that there's people like you that are authentic to say, hey, this is working. Like, hey, maybe you should look at this. So again, thank you for everything that you're doing. And I've watched your podcast as well, and I've learned from a lot of the guests that you have as well.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron. So always happy to bounce ideas and have another friend in the podcasting world. So keep it up, Manny. All the best. We'll keep tabs on you. We'll talk again soon.
All right. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Rebecca.
See ya.
See ya.